Hello, Dee. Thank you very much
Hello.
for coming to spend some time and have a conversation with me today.
Oh, you're
Now,
welcome.
I've known you for quite a long time. Do
Mm.
you, do you remember when we first met and where I met you?
Yeah, yeah, I remember. I think it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, if I
Mm,
remember rightly, at a PoTS UK meeting,
mm,
a PoTS support group that was at the community centre near where I live actually, which is why I went to it because it's close, and I was like,
mm,
oh, that's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it?
mm,
And yeah, that was the first time that I met you, and
mm. I reckon it
I
was more years ago than that. I think we've had the COVID void.
oh
But yeah,
maybe
so I used
yeah.
to run support groups in Sheffield for people with POTS, which is postural tachycardia syndrome. So it was one of these sessions that I met Dee. And when I first met Dee, I remember Dee was there with a stick. I remember Dee needing to use a wheelchair. Just tell us what your life was like around that time.
Uh, well, it wasn't good. I remember like actually thinking about how I was going to get to that meeting, and the meeting itself was only a few minutes away, and just down the road, and thinking, oh, I hope I can make it, because there was no one to push me. And it did see it. So I think I drove there. So I got outside, drove there, and then got out with my stick and got in. And I was very, very limited, very limited. I I was under the POTS clinic still, and I was being trialed on different medications, and I was really, really frightened of doing anything. Uh, the fear itself was just massive because I had a few incidents where I had collapsed, and that just the horror of that happening again uh, just made me aware of everything all the time. So,
Mm,
how far
mm,
was I walking? Would I be near the house? Um, can someone push me in a wheelchair because it's easier because I wouldn't risk collapsing? And so I was pretty much housebound, I think, at the time. I wasn't working, definitely.
mm, mm. And at the time, what were the medical diagnoses that you had been given?
Right. So at that time I had POTS, postural tachycardia. Uh, I'd had. They said it was orthostatic hypotension.
Okay, so
Uh,
orthostatic means upright, hypotension, the blood pressure can go too low, which can cause fainting episodes.
yeah, so I think the POTS was in response to my low blood pressure because a lot of it
Mm,
was showing on the test that I just had low blood pressure. That it
mm,
wasn't actually as related to standing up; it was just low all the time.
mm.
Uh, I'd had a diagnosis years earlier of Ehlers-Danlos 3 or hypermobility syndrome, and at the time the NHS was saying that they were saying the same thing,
Mm,
and it was before the new criteria came in, so there was no
mm,
kind of way to pick it apart. So I really don't know. I don't think I'd fall into it now. I don't
mm,
know, but at the time that's what they were saying. So I'm
mm,
very hypermobile. Uh, Various other things, chronic migraines, asthma. Actually, my asthma wasn't too bad at that point, but it had been bad in the past. And just various other health things over the years, and crippling fatigue, I think, was probably the worst of it.
mm, mm,
And I was putting down to the POTS. I was putting it down to the hypermobility that had caused the POTS because that's what everybody says. I also was told I had uh, a mast cell disorder. So what is it? What's it called? MCAS.
yeah,
MCAS.
mast cell activation syndrome.
Yeah, so I've
Mm.
been diagnosed with MCAS as well.
And it's often thought that you have the trio hypermobility, MCAS, and POTS are often interlinked. But
Yeah,
you
and
mentioned that there is often this thought that you have POTS because you are hypermobile. What do you think
yeah,
of that now?
I'm not sure now. I am really not sure now. I think we're going to get onto this later because when I
Mm,
started really thinking about it and really looking at the POTS, my perception of what had been the cause of it changed.
mm,
Uh, but I was actually referred to the PoTS clinic from the geneticist. So there's definitely a link in services. And then it was the PoTS clinic that diagnosed me with MCAS. So, and when everybody's telling you that they're connected, you just think they are connected. Like, this is medical, this is fully medical, this is what I was born with, and it's nothing to do with anything else, really, with the way I'm living my life. It was always going to happen. I was just doomed this way.
So that was your belief that you held at the time?
Yeah, definitely. I believed this was genetic. This is how it was. This is how it was always going to be. Because the blood pressure had got to a point where it was so low, they told me at the PoTS clinic that standing up over a few minutes was a really bad idea. Because it would be, I'd risk keeling over. The test showed this, so the test must be right. And they were trialing me on various medications at that point. And a lot of the medications that I was trialed on actually made it worse than better. Or that they worked for a short amount of time and then the side effects actually overtook what was the problem in the first place. Like the weight gain, because when you met me, I'd gained a lot of weight, which was directly, I'm pretty sure, because it fell off me when I stopped taking them. I'm pretty sure it was directly related to the medication I was on.
And that was fludrocortisone, is that right?
Yeah, it was. And then so they put me on that one. I've been put on, is it Ivabradine? Ivabradine. There was an antidepressant one I was put on as well. I can't remember the name of it. I didn't stay on it very long because it seemed to make me feel worse. So, and I have a bit of a, I think there's also the stigma of, mental health medication, and I've got a history of mental health, which I'm going to go into, and I didn't want to take it because this wasn't mental health. It was not mental health, Nobody could tell me that.
So many years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago I first met you.
It might have been. So
your belief was you had these medical diagnoses of PoTS, EDS type 3, as it was known at the time, MCAS, chronic fatigue, which was purely medical, biomedical model. That was your belief.
Yeah.
And that's how it was.
Yes. Yeah. So it started early. Like, I'd started having symptoms very early in life as a teenager. And I'd struggled with symptoms for years. I mean, years and years struggling with symptoms. And then when I finally got these diagnoses, I clung on for dear life.
Which is understandable. Somebody is making some sense of everything that's been going on in your life and your body for so long. So moving on, tell us where you're at now in terms of how well you're doing.
It's a bit different. It's definitely a bit different. So I've been, I do a lot. I walk pretty freely. I've just come back. I walked into Sheffield Centre and back again this morning, which was absolutely unthinkable. I'm working. I'm also volunteering. I love wild swimming. Love it. Absolutely love it. I climbed mountains. I've climbed mountains. Yeah. Since. I just love it. I love being outdoors. I love exercise. I love walking. I like giving back to the community. I feel like my life is, I was just saying actually before we started recording, I feel like my life is really, really full and sometimes a bit too full. But yeah, in comparison to where I was, it's incredible, really.
And the stick and the wheelchair?
No, God, I gave the wheelchair away, I think. Right. Yeah, I was just thinking I shouldn't say that because my mum might watch this because she gave me it. But I saw a post online saying somebody needed to borrow a wheelchair because somebody wasn't very well, and I just thought it'd be a nice thing to do to give it away. So I gave it to somebody that needed it. The stick, it's upstairs. If I'm going hiking, I might bring it with me. Don't need it anymore.
Great.
Loads.
Amazing.
I've got drawers full of braces. You know, I could brace my legs up. I've got compression stockings, and none of them is really used. So yeah.
Did any of them help at the time when you were using them, the braces and the compression?
Uh,
Or was that belief that that's what you were told that you needed to do?
it was belief, I think. I've got a very flexible ankle, and it's from old injury, so it's like a genuine problem. But I got really scared of going over on the ankle,
Mm.
so I I got given braces for my ankles,
Mm-hmm.
and actually they caused more pain and discomfort. And actually, I think more problems. I mean, you saw me when I was using the stick, and I had a lot of weakness on one side. And I think from bracing, using the stick, and using the wheelchair, I'd lost a lot of strength,
Mm-hmm.
natural.
Mm-hmm.
And that just went back into me believing that this was the hypermobility, this was the connective tissue disorder. I didn't have the strength because of that, and not because I wasn't actually using the muscles the way that you should do to keep them working properly.
So how did you get from where you were so many years ago with your stick in your wheelchair to where you are now? What has been your journey?
Well, it's an interesting one because I in the time that I've known you, I've got married and I've done a lot of different things. And when I first met you, I think I might have been living alone at that point. So, and I had been working full time, and then I'd had to leave because I went through a very traumatic experience where I was managed out, and I was living on my own, and I was trying to manage everything. And then I met Martin, who is just a wonderful human being, because I was going through all of these issues, and he still he still liked me, and I felt like it was like that anyway, that like nobody would like me because I was broken. So I think he had a belief in me, and then I gradually started just thinking I don't want to be like this anymore. I want to do something that's going to help. And I got myself a little cycle, where you sit down and you can cycle while you're watching the telly to try and get some strength back. And then I thought about doing some exercise, and I looked up, somebody mentioned Pilates. I looked up Pilates, and that's where I found you online. And then put together that you were the person that I'd met at the meeting years earlier. The meeting was about exercise, actually, that we went to, and there was me there who was at the time probably about 6 stone overweight, and like basically struggled to get out of the door. Just you were mentioning exercise, and I was thought, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to be able to do that. It's just not happening. So when I saw it was you, I just thought, well, I'll give it a shot. I'll just try it. So I came along and started doing Pilates with my stick.
That's right.
Yeah, and I had a sort of session with you 1-to-1. And I remember you said to me, you're doing more damage using a stick than not doing a stick, because I was scared of falling over. And you said, if you're going to use a stick, at least use 2 sticks, so you're losing muscle mass at the same on both sides. And I thought to myself, I can't use 2 sticks. How am I going to carry anything? I'm going to carry my handbag if I have to use 2 sticks every day. So I thought, right, I'm going to gradually start losing the stick and getting my confidence back with balance and walking. And then I started doing Pilates, and I started doing walking more, just gradually every day, building it up. And I started getting a bit better. And I had, at this point, I'd got married and I was living with Martin, and my life was much more secure. And I didn't have the financial burdens I had before. Well, everyone has burdens, don't they? But I didn't you know, I wasn't on the breadline or whatever, because I was very, very, very poor for a while, because it took them a year to actually assess me for disability benefits. So I was like scraping by with nothing, and it was an incredibly stressful time. And I wasn't in that sort of acute time of stress. And suddenly my symptoms started lifting, and I started to do more Pilates, and I started, you know, getting involved with more things, and I started really thinking, like, I can do more now. What are the reasons I can do more now compared to before? And I started really thinking about burnout. And I had a friend called Linda, and Linda was into sort of this kind of, she was into GABA and other things like that. And she said, well, if your autonomic system isn't working, you know, if there's problems with that, have you looked at like burnout? Have you looked at the effects that burnout have on the autonomic system and like long-term chronic stress? And I started really looking at it. And I remember I mentioned that to you at a Pilates session. And I think you thought that I was very fixed in the diagnosis that I had, and I had been in the past, but it was starting to sort of unravel a bit, because it didn't make sense to me why, in times of not stress, I was so much better than I was when something happened. And I started to really think about, what impact is stress having on me? You know, really look at like how I deal with stress and coping mechanisms, and yeah, Linda mentioned the trauma word, and like really look at like where this has come from, like why I am so highly, I guess highly, I don't know if highly strung is the word, but I always felt like I couldn't deal with anything. Like a loud noise would make me hit the ceiling, you know, all the time. I seem to be walking around like that. And I started to really think, how can I have PoTS, which is an autonomic system thing? How is it caused by these other things when I am so highly stressed anyway? Big push against that, thinking like a lot of people on the PoTS sites are just like, oh no, it's nothing to do with anxiety. It's nothing to do with anxiety. But I started to believe it was. And I didn't want to say anything because I thought people might, you know, I thought if I start saying, oh, I think my anxiety is making this, either causing it or making it so much worse, that people would, I don't know. It's stigma, isn't it?
It's a tricky one, because your nervous system remembers things that have happened. So for a number of people, they can feel their heart rate going really fast, and they're just doing something really normal like cooking. So there's no stress there. They're not anxious. It's not an anxiety thing. It's a nervous system response, nervous system programming. But a number of people with PoTS do have coexisting anxiety, and they can usually differentiate that they might be in a crowded place and they start to feel anxious, and they start to feel like they're getting a panic attack, and they can say, no, that was anxiety. That's different from PoTS. So often people with PoTS, if somebody says, oh, it's anxiety, they start to feel a little bit like, no, it's different.
No, I understand completely what you're talking about, because the symptoms are different.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah, completely different. But they were coming at the same times.
Yeah.
So I think it was more to do with the fact that when I was in stressful situations, I was getting more of the PoTS symptoms, which are different from anxiety. But they were still, it still sort of was coming at the same point. So I know, what is it? Correlation does not mean.
It seemed to be interlinked in some
Yeah,
way.
it seemed to be interlinked,
Yeah,
and I started thinking it might be, but then I was thinking, well, is it? But it seemed to be, and I couldn't shake the fact that it seemed to be interlinked, and the fact that I must have really badly burnt out, because I was getting better when things were better in life, and I just thought I must have.
You've used the term burnout a little bit. Let's just think about that. Often what happens with people with PoTS, there's a sort of whole stack of sort of childhood stresses. A number of people I talk to, if I sort of get them to give me a scale of what their childhood anxiety was like, sort of from 0 to 10, they're often really high.
Yeah.
And so the nervous system is already in this heightened state of alert. You mentioned being quite sensitive to your environment. I think you're naturally what we call a HSP, highly sensitive person. Some people believe that's a sort of personality trait. I would say it's probably linked with your maternal stress. So you could be born with, we're all born with a certain amount of stress hormones. And if that bank is already slightly depleted, you might be born sort of a little bit more on high alert, and that's sort of passed down through the generations.
Yeah. My mum had quite a stressful childhood.
Right.
She had quite a stressful life. And I think I came in, and I think she had quite a stressful pregnancy as well. So I'd probably come in to life already used to being highly stressed. And it's really interesting when you start looking at stresses on babies in the womb. I mean, God, everything that the mother experiences, the child does too. And I don't know, you're better at, I mean, you've got a history of being a nurse, you'll know more about this than me, but I think they used to think that things couldn't pass the placenta. They used to believe that certain things couldn't pass through. And I think now I know that they know that that's not true. So whatever the mother was doing, whatever was happening with her, was basically happening to me at the same time. And considering she was a skydiver and she didn't know she was pregnant until she was 6 months, I was skydiving as a fetus, which I'm sure brings a massive amount of anxiety. So I think I probably was exposed to a huge level of stress hormones before even being born.
Yeah, exactly. So that's your start point in life, which is going to make you very sort of on high alert, even as a baby. And then, so that when that's your start point, then that has a knock-on effect for the rest of your life.
Yeah, definitely. And my childhood was a pretty stressful time. Oh, hello. I'm not sure if you're supposed to be in here. So yeah, my childhood was quite stressful as well, with various different things. And I'm also incredibly dyslexic. I've got ADHD, and there is all these different things that were just incredibly triggering. I also I'm quite smart, but I couldn't perform at school, and I found that horrific. Because I knew I wasn't stupid. I just couldn't get to the level that I thought I should be at, and I just punished myself.
The ADHD diagnosis is quite interesting, because I know Gabor Mate, he's a physician and a trauma specialist who's written a book specifically about this, and he would say, I mean, again, maternal stress, that influences the brain development of an unborn fetus. And he very much would say that your environment that you grow up in, it has a significant influence on the development of something like ADHD. And that it's probably more the personality traits, your survival instincts that create these traits of what we call ADHD or ADD.
Well, the interesting thing is I was diagnosed with it not because I was particularly hyperactive, but I was zoning out. So I think it would be, what do they call it, when you're gone?
You were dissociating.
I was dissociating to the point that they were saying my name on the register and I wasn't there. And I was missing lunches because you put your lunch order in at the beginning of when you arrived at school, and I was away with the fairies. I was somewhere else, literally somewhere else. I was in my own imagination and so far from what was going on in the room that they thought I had epilepsy. So they thought I was having some kind of fit, and then this person assessed me and said, no, it's this, because it was before it was ADD. It's all very complicated, isn't it? Because this is a long time ago, being in my 40s now, it's a very long time ago. And they were only just sort of getting their head around, this is the very beginning of it. And it was before even hyperactivity it was ADD, wasn't it? Attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
It's before they added the H. And it's very confusing.
The terms are used interchangeably, and it depends on what country you're talking to, whether it's US or the UK as well.
But it's
So I was
very
very,
much
very at the beginning of that, when that was first coming in, and they were just explaining to me, I remember that my brain was working faster than it should be. And that was the reason that I was having these dissociative episodes.
And what happens is that we try to put a diagnostic label on something. So let's call this ADD. You sort of fit this criteria, so you have another label to add to your medication.
That's
But
it.
actually, dissociation is a protective response. We all dissociate to a certain extent. You're probably going into a daydreaming state because you felt safe there.
Yeah, I did. I spent most of my childhood in a daydreaming state because it was the only place I did feel safe. I was very, very fearful around people. Very, very shy, very just crippled with anxiety. A level that I don't think any child should feel. I don't think it's normal to feel sort of how I did feel.
Yeah,
there were various circumstances that brought that on. I was quite lucky actually, because I wasn't, I don't know, this is going to be a bit this is a delicate subject, but I was quite lucky that they weren't prescribing medication for things at that point, because of what happened further on in my life with medication and substances. Things to make it better ended up being a bigger issue than actually the issue to begin with. So I'm quite glad that I wasn't put on any medication for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about your childhood experience very much resonates with my childhood experience. I'm also dyslexic. I've got PoTS. I'd say I've recovered from PoTS now, but mega high childhood anxiety. I look back and think, oh my goodness, like no child should have to experience that level of anxiety. It is horrendous. And the dissociating, the daydreaming, I spent my life in this daydreaming world because I got a bit of relief from my environment by being in that state.
Just God, it was just so much easier than reality. Like, really was. Like, I mean, I wasn't a great reader, but I'd listen to audiobooks and I'd watch television, and I'd do anything I could just to be away from sort of life how it was. And I remember I was so anxious that I'd get up on a morning and I'd shake like that. And I got very poorly when I was about, I think I got 14, and I got glandular fever. And that just finished me. That was it. That was just, I'd been incredibly stressed. I'd been, my body must have been under so much pressure that just kind of, for a while, just snapped it. Like, my hair started to thin. I ended up with ulcers. I had a chronic cough that wouldn't go away, and every morning I'd get out of bed and I'd shake like this, and my skin was terrible. I had it's like an eczema that wouldn't go away. Like, my whole body was just breaking down, and I felt like it. I felt like everything was breaking, and no one believed me. And it was a really, really difficult point to be that poorly and have to keep going because no one would believe me. And yeah, it was pretty horrible.
So you had a high level of childhood anxiety and stress. Symptoms. When did symptoms first start? When do you remember first experiencing a symptom? Do you remember?
God, it's always been there in a way.
Okay.
I remember it was put down to growing pains when I was younger, because I'd have horrible pains on an evening.
Right.
And they just said it was growing pains, and then all these other things came on, and stomach. Upset stomach, so irritable bowel syndrome. Got diagnosed with that when I was about 12.
Right.
And it just accumulated and accumulated.
Right, yeah.
Until...
So there's a build-up, then glandular fever, which is it's a common trigger for PoTS symptoms to start. So you often hear people, they have a virus such as glandular fever. I mean, now it's COVID. People have COVID.
Oh yeah. It's long glandular fever that I'm actually suffering from.
Yeah.
For the last 30 years. Sorry. No, I shouldn't make a joke about that, because long COVID is quite serious, but I do suspect that it
very
is
real. But there's a similar kind of
is pretty similar. Yeah, it's very real. Yeah.
A
And
similar
I think
kind of pattern, a build-up of stresses, a trigger such as a virus, and the trigger might be a number of other triggers that seem to knock the nerve system into a state of, I can't do this anymore. So that's kind of like the burnout, what you describe.
Oh, it was terrible. I basically couldn't get out of bed. My mum pulling the covers off me and having to literally physically pull me out of bed. And I wanted to sleep all the time. I had this awful cough, which they diagnosed as asthma. All of these things, just this massive, and that was burden on top of what already a childhood that was already pretty burdened. So I think this then being sick on top of being incredibly stressed and all of this. Oh, it was horrible. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get out of childhood. I want to hear people say about wanting to go back to being a child. I'm like, oh God, no, don't, no.
And how did you cope with all those symptoms and fatigue at the time?
I didn't. I really didn't. I missed a lot of my last 2 years of school. And I just didn't. I was. I just. Yeah, I can't even think back that far. It was just such a horrible time. And I felt like everyone around me was cross. And then the doctor told me it was mental health. And they started medicating me for mental health. And suddenly it was mental health. And I went on this journey of it then being mental health. And I think that was when I was about 15. That was when it was labelled as mental health, about a year after I had glandular fever. And school tried to get me some help for mental health, but my mum didn't think it was mental health, so she didn't want me to go down that way. There was a lot of pressure on me. I felt it all the time to be kind of what I wasn't, and it was really difficult. And that's kind of when the next part of my story comes in, which is I discovered alcohol. And as somebody that's highly strung, incredibly anxious and very shy, it was like a miracle drug, at 16 to drink alcohol. It was just like, wow, this is fixed, all of this horrificness is fixed because I can drink and I can be happy around people, and all of this anxiety is taken away. And that led me down another path of being very poorly, because as I know now, as somebody that kind of works in that area, alcohol doesn't solve your problems, but you believe it does, and it just makes everything worse.
So you've managed to recover from alcohol misuse?
Yes. So I had about 10 years of misusing alcohol and being very ill at the same time and drinking. And then I thought it was, at the end of it, I thought it was all the drinking, and if I stopped that, then everything would be great. But yes, I've recovered from that. I still manage that. I still, as I said, I work in the area. I still go to meetings. I still manage my recovery in that area. And I think that was a big motivator, actually, of when I did get really ill later, of thinking that people can change, because I'd changed so much anyway with that part of me. That, we like to think of ourselves as being quite fixed, but actually we're not.
So what have been the key things that have made a difference to work towards your recovery? Now, I say recovery, I say we're all on a healing journey. We never get to the point where we would like to get to. But you've come an awfully long way. So how have you got here?
How have I got here to this point?
What's your tips?
Tips?
What have you done? What's made a difference to you?
Oh, I think what's really made a difference is, sorry, my kittens.
Kittens.
Don't distract me, Jujubee. I think the main thing is that I was incredibly hard on myself. And I think that came from childhood. That came from being a reasonably smart person that couldn't achieve, and not knowing why, and thinking if I just pushed myself. And like really looking at this and just thinking that there is another way. You know, I think the Buddhists call it like the second arrow, where the first arrow is what happens to you, but then you keep firing other arrows at yourself. So the first arrow is an incident that happens. So say that you lose your job, and then the second arrow is how you feel about it, and the stress and anxiety that comes with that, and everything else that you put on top of that first thing. And I think it's like the ability to think, well, the first thing happened, I'm going to sort that, and I'm going to just not put anything else on it. I'm not sure if that makes sense. So I think being ill, there's a lot of, when you are like that, there's a lot of emotions and feelings and stresses that comes along with being ill. So when you can't achieve what you think you should be achieving, when you're struggling to get out of the house, when you feel like you're a disappointment for everybody, and you know, you put all of these stresses on top of yourself, which make the illness or whatever's going on in your body 100 times worse. So I think really just looking at it, it's like, this is how I am at the moment, and I've got to deal with this, and I don't need all of that other stuff to put on top of it. And if it was burnout, I've got to find a way to be kind to myself, to get to a point that I want to be, you know, and gradually do it. I don't have to be better straight away. And I think the idea that I don't need to be better straight away, but any progress is progress, was really helpful. And I think that, I'm not sure if I'm going off topic, you know, I'm trying to, I think that, and realizing that actually putting myself in stressful situations made everything worse. And that if I did little bits of things and cut the extra stress out of my life that I was giving myself, that it would make it easier. And also just the autonomic system, like really looking at the autonomic system, really looking at what is going on for me. You know, I've got really low blood pressure, I've got a really high heart rate, I startle easily, I don't sweat properly. All of these things are linked to stress responses. And if you really look at how the body responds when it's under stress, you'll see it affects all of these areas. And if I've been under chronic stress for a long time, my body's not going to snap back to being normal. It's going to need some retraining. It's going to need some tools in place that can help me get back to a functioning level.
So what I'm hearing so far is, number one is acknowledging the impact of stress on your nervous system, acknowledging childhood stresses, generational stresses that you've been born with, life stresses, and that your nervous system is sensitive, and learning to manage those stresses.
Yes, and also I think with the fatigue's quite an interesting one, because I don't think I've touched on the fatigue much. The fatigue was probably the most crippling symptom. Absolutely, it was like being hit by a bus, and like trying to deal with anything was just really, really hard work. And something I have learned in actually quite recent times is that whenever we're dealing with something, we're not just dealing with that one thing. We're dealing with our brain. Our brains are made to make connections. That's how it keeps us safe. So whenever something happens, it's not where does it look for understanding what's happening. It looks to the past. So if something's happening to me now and my brain is automatically making connections, then it's re-traumatizing me. Then I'm not just dealing with that thing, I'm dealing with everything else that's ever happened to me all at the same time. And no wonder I'm tired.
Yes.
No wonder I feel like I've been hit by a bus, because I'm not in the present with these things.
Yeah.
You know, I'm they call it conditioning, isn't it? I'm conditioned to respond in a certain way.
Yeah.
And through trauma and other things that have happened. And I think once you kind of understand that, it's difficult to stop it happening, but at least you're aware of it. And you start being able to like really retrain your brain to be in the present with things. So meditation's a good thing for me. I don't particularly enjoy doing it, which is quite funny because I don't particularly enjoy the meditation and I don't particularly enjoy the Pilates. I've said this before. I'm sorry, Lorna, you're a great Pilates teacher.
Thanks.
But it's not, I don't enjoy it, you know, it's not something I enjoy doing, but it's bloody good for me, you know. And I know it's good for me because when I'm doing the right things, my life is better around them. So I think it's acknowledging and like looking at what is good for you, what feeds you. Like swimming is great, I love it. But you know, when it's cold and we're getting in the plunge pool, when you're getting in, it doesn't feel good to begin with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like it feels good when you're in there, but actually putting a foot in the water, it doesn't feel like it's going to be great.
So this is, we both go wild swimming. Actually, Dee has encouraged me to go wild swimming with her. So what is it about this cold water exposure that I know it's another one of those things that have made a difference? Why is it making a difference?
Because you're so present. You know what I was saying about everything? Like you're never actually in the moment. You're always in the past or you're thinking about the future. But when you're swimming and it's cold, you're completely in the present. You know, you can feel your body, you're in your body and you can feel it. And it just brings you back, it grounds you in a way that not many things do. You know, we're so detached from nature now. And I think like really grounding yourself into your body, like is so helpful for me because then you can like clear out the clutter, you know, the stuff that you're thinking about from the future that you don't even know you're thinking about, and the stuff from the past that's terrifying you about the stuff from the future. You know, it gives me the ability anyway to just clear that out. And you're in the water and it's cold and that's where you are and you're dealing with it, and then you get out, you have a swim and it's amazing, and you get out and you look after yourself and you warm yourself up because you can't think of anything else at that point. You know, when you're cold and you're coming out and you're shivering, you have to warm yourself up. You have to be in the present. You can't think about what you're doing next week. You can't think about much else than looking after yourself. And I think that's really important that you have spaces. I think swimming does that for me, but we need to work those into our everyday life. Like just have spaces where we won't allow ourselves to think about anything that isn't the present. Because that's kind of where it calms the autonomic system down. And also in a way, I think with swimming, it shocks the autonomic system. It gives it a proper physical shock and then it comes down again.
I think you're right. Thinking of it from a nervous system perspective, I mean, we started off talking about fatigue, and from a nervous system state, fatigue is often a sort of freeze state, a freeze, shutdown, immobility. And when you go into cold water, it brings your nervous system into a sympathetic. So it makes your heart go faster, but it's in a controlled way. And then the outcome of that, it brings you into the present, mindful. You just notice the sensations in your body. It brings you back into your body.
Yeah. And I think that's really good for me because I think I had just detached completely from my body at points. I think I felt it was too painful to be there.
Yeah, which is really common. A lot of the work I do is helping people to reconnect with their body, reconnect with the sensations in their body. And that's where healing can happen, because people have become disembodied, as we say, disconnected, cognitive in their head, but are just not aware. It's too difficult to be in their body.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's and that's why we have to live in our body, don't we? We don't really have a choice about it. And I think when you can embrace it, it's like sitting with pain. It's like you can't run away from it. You know, and I think a lot of the time with the drinking and other things, I just wanted to get away from it. I wanted to get away from what it was like to exist in my own body. And actually, you know, if done right, it's okay. But also I think busy life does that. I think in when I had just before I met you, when I was diagnosed with PoTS. I'd gone through a particularly traumatic experience. A relationship had ended, and I'd moved on my own, and then I think I'd lost a job. But a lot of things had happened in order for me, like one after the other. It was like dunk, 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 dunk. And I didn't want to be in my body. I didn't want to feel that. And because I hadn't got any other coping, because I hadn't got the coping mechanisms that I used to do, you know, I don't drink, I don't take medications, like that change the way you feel, all of this. It was kind of like I had to find another way of not being in my body. And I think my body was just, I think that's kind of why my health got so bad, because I was just denying that I was in my body, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just one thing you mentioned about earlier was fear. So you talked about fear of going over in your ankle. How have you, because fear is often what really stops people from sort of improving recovery. Fear that if I go out, I might collapse. Fear that if I stand for more than 5 minutes, but I've been told I must only stand for 5 minutes, something bad's going to happen. How have you overcome those fears? What are there other fears that you could share, and how you overcome them?
I had a lot of therapy. I think early on when I stopped drinking, and there's this really interesting thing about fear, is that it never disappears if you don't do anything. If you don't do anything, it's never going to get better. And I think it's almost like it's not. It's fearing it's so cheesy. Feeling the fear and doing it anyway, because that's the only way you beat the fear. And I think there is a lot of these sort of ideas that if something is frightening, then we need to stay away from it. And like, you know, you hear a lot about safe spaces recently, and you know, safe spaces are good, but you know, safe spaces aren't a place to hide. And I think the idea of like, I mean, I remember having an argument with this therapist that was just like, you must do this, do you? And I was like, no, I can't. I'm too weak and vulnerable. And no, stay away. And actually, the best thing you can do with something that you're frightened of is actually doing it. And I understand that now. And I understood it, you know, I understood it back then. But actually, it just took a while for me to actually realize that. All of the things that I've overcome in my life so far, it's doing things despite the way you feel.
Absolutely. And so with fear, you're right, it's feel the fear and do it, but there's ways to do that safely and being kind to yourself. So sometimes visualizing something. So if your goal is to spend more time standing than what you have been, visualize yourself standing for 10 minutes without symptoms, being comfortable. So you're kind of preparing your mind for what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And then there's sending yourself messages of safety, just reminding yourself your body is fine, it's safe, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can do this.
Oh, this is my normal.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of people, and I did this myself, and they get smartwatches, and then they look at what's normal, and then they compare their smartwatches to what's normal, and they're like, oh my God, my heart rate is so fast. I must not get into this fast heart rate.
Yes.
I must not risk it. And I did that for a while, and I think that just fed into the fear.
It does, absolutely.
So I don't use them. I don't want to know, you know, because if I'm feeling all right, I can do it.
Yeah. And with PoTS, your heart rate goes fast, and it's kind of reminding yourself your heart is designed to go fast. Yeah. It's okay. When you exercise, it will go up to 180 plus. It's normal. You're not doing it any harm. And yes, with PoTS, it responds inappropriately, but it's safe. And you can actually do quite a lot with a heart rate that might not be quite as responding as what it should do.
No, no, you can. And I think that's it. I think I just, I must keep it in this range. I must not push it. And actually, I needed to push it to push myself. I needed to get my fitness back. I needed it because in order to function, we need to be at a certain level of fitness. And even when you have got PoTS and there is something going on, you need to keep that level of fitness or it's just going to get worse. And yeah, it is that kind of that barrier that I need to get. I need to put myself in this heart rate zone in order to actually get fitter.
And it is coming back to being present with the symptoms and sensations that you have in your body, that it's okay, it's safe.
Yeah,
it's not dangerous. Palpitations is not dangerous. Chest pain, honestly, having a heart attack, which is a different thing, it's okay. And you sit with these sensations, not judging, not pushing it away. Take these sensations with fatigue is another one.
Yeah.
My fatigue, it just comes with me. It's okay.
Yeah. It is. It's the second arrow. I keep mentioning this, but this is the way that I think about it in my head. It's like your heart rate's going fast and you can feel it and you get chest pains. And that's what's happening. But then the second arrow is that, oh my God, am I having a heart attack? This is not normal. I am so unnormal. This is terrible. This is awful. This is that and the other. And actually, I've had various tests and my heart's all right. Does that make sense? So it is. I know now this is PoTS. This is what PoTS is. PoTS is a high heart rate and chest pain. And I still get it occasionally. I'm not fixed. I'm not cured. I'm not, I'm healing.
That's why I say that we're on this healing journey.
Yeah.
And we're learning all the time. And time is running away with us. I could talk to you for a whole lot longer. Do you have a few sort of final words of hope that you would like to share in part?
Yeah. People can change. You can change your stress response. It takes time. And recovery is not a straight line from anything. Recovery is like this. And if you accept that and just go with it, it's a lot easier. And it's all right to trip up. You don't need to add extra pressure on yourself. And nobody's perfect. Nobody's got it sorted out. And I think looking at, this is a recovery one. It's the outside inside thing, and looking at other people and seeing how well they're doing, and then comparing it to how you feel on the inside. It's not helpful. Comparing isn't helpful. And I think once you can put down that comparing yourself to other people, then you can get on with your recovery yourself, instead of it being about competing with other people or, matching what other people do or anything like that. You just, in your body, you are you, and you can improve on yourself. And really just watch what your triggers are. Like, really look at it, like, and watch what activities give you fatigue and what take it away. Because that was a really important one for me. Like, really, and make sure that you get a good balance of things. If you're doing something that's going to give you fatigue, do something that brings you to life, that gives you it back. Because sometimes if the things that give you fatigue are the things that, like everyday stresses, we just think that, oh, I need to get it done, I'll just get it done, I'll just get everything done. And before you know it, you haven't given yourself a break and you haven't taken that time that you need.
But one thing I remember you sort of sharing with me was often we blame the fatigue on it was I did a Pilates class, I went for a walk.
Oh yeah.
And I remember you saying it's not physical, it's emotional.
Yeah, it's I get really drained by people. I get really drained in group situations. I'm introverted. I don't think I'll ever be able to change that, but I can make sure that if I'm going into a group situation, then I give myself a bit of time. I'm pretty tired at the moment because I've had a couple of days of training. in Doncaster, so I had to get in the train early morning, do a full day of training in a group of people, get the train back, and then did the second day, same thing. And then by the second day, I got in and I just went to bed, and I was all right with that, you know. And like, if that had been a few years ago, it would be, oh my God, the fatigue is back. I'm never going to feel better. You know, this is how it's going to be. I am a terrible, you know, I'm weak. And actually what it was is that I've just done something for 2 days that I find really tiring, and I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to sleep it off, and I'm going to do something tomorrow that makes me feel better.
Absolutely. And I think we're not all designed to live in this world running at 200 miles an hour.
No,
And
we're
actually, some of us, well, most of us can't function at the pace society is putting on us.
Yeah, and I still get it wrong. I got it wrong recently. I had COVID, and I thought to myself, "Oh, this will be short-lived. I'm fine. I've got through so many things." And actually, it hit me pretty hard for a couple of weeks, and then I decided that I was going to go start doing things straight away. And it was like I'd been hit by a bus again. And I was like, actually, I've had this major infection. I've got to take it really easy, and I've got to gradually get back to what I was doing, and I've got to be really kind to myself. I've got to be really, really kind to myself, and I'm improving. You know, I'm getting back to the level I was, but I had to get it back to basics in a way. Like, how did I get better the first time? And it was taking the anxiety out of it. And I think that label of long COVID, like, that's kind of why I laughed earlier, because I've had asthma since I was a child, as I said, and I had COVID, and I think this is the second time I had COVID, and my asthma got worse the first time, and then the second time it hit my chest again. And I went to see the nurse, and the nurse was lovely, and she was really helpful. And she then asked about other symptoms, things in the past, and then she said about long COVID, and I was just like, no, do not go there with me. This is not long COVID. I have had these symptoms for years. I don't need another label, because I don't want that to play with my brain. I didn't want the fear to kick in.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I've taken a different inhaler. It's working. The inflammation in my lungs has started to go down. I can feel it. And I'm not, because a few years ago, I would have just been, oh my God, it's long COVID. And then I would have had a lot of anxiety on top of it. And maybe it would have made the symptoms worse.
Anyway, I think we will finish there.
Yeah, sorry.
But thank you so much for taking the time to share. There's just so much wisdom in what you've been saying. So thank you very much.
No, it's okay. I hope it's helpful to people.